I should be. My God created me and gave me all the things I need. Who are you to stop me from being who I am? Who are you to take away what I am? Who are you to stop me from being who I am? Who are you to take away what I am? Freedom, 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 yes, freedom, 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 yes, freedom. I can say I deserve the right to say I cannot stay a second-class citizen in my mama land. You can say you deserve the right to say, do you want to stay a second-class citizen in your mama land? Sharia law must no longer be my love. I'll be okay, free and proud with you, my love. Freedom, 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 yes, freedom, 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 yes, freedom, 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 yes, freedom, 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 yes, freedom.
Good evening and good morning, viewers of the Voice of the People Forum, and also the listeners of South Sudan Political Club. Salam alaikum, Mr. Al-Khair, my brother, my Dr. Mayluk, my brother Amigo, my sister Demonica, and also our audience down there. Good evening to all of you. Salam alaikum, marhabekum. وأنا سعيد إنه نكون معكم في الأمسية ده. I know there is many room are going in the clubhouse, but as you guys know, our room actually we announced it on Saturday, last Saturday, and the room was scheduled from Saturday, so we cannot actually extend the room because we have guests with us tonight, and that's why we opened the room. We'll continue with interview, and then anyone will come later on. They will actually they will listen to the recording. The room will be recording in Clubhouse, and also will be recorded in Facebook and also in YouTube. So those are watching live video where you are in Facebook, please share the video. Share the video with your friend, and also. Tonight, we are actually going to be here with Dr. Peter Biarajak, who will be our guest tonight for the second time in the Voice of People Forum. للأسف الشديد الناس اللي قاعدين في clubhouse, those in the clubhouse, actually, as we know, Dr. Peter Biar actually عربي بتاعه تقريبا بسيط خالص. Maybe he will try to mix it up قدام هناك if he is able, but what I know so far هو زول بتاع الانجليزي. هو كل الانسس والانترفيو بتاعنا معه بكون بانجليزي. لو نينا انتهينا معه, we are not going to be here more than 1 hour and a half or 2 hours with Dr. Peter Biar, and then Amigo, Demonica, Mayluk, they can continue the topic later on in the clubhouse if they are willing, or if people are willing to come up. So before I go forward and bring the doctor up, Mayluk, welcome, Amigo, Demonica, let me give you guys 1 second if you guys want to say anything. and then we'll bring our guests up on the podium. may look interview.
أنا قاعد
تفضل لو داير تقول حاجة. سلم على المشاهدين before we bring the guests up.
خليني أشكرك وأشكر الجيست بتاعك دكتور بيتر بيار. Always زي ما أنت قلت قبل شوية, this is his second time with us in South Sudan Political Club and Minnesota Shop. We always, we appreciate him for coming, to our platform and to come and brief the people of South Sudan about, our political affair, what is going on in our country. So we really, appreciate his time and his presence, and we'll continue, to listen to him and to hear from him, because I think he's aware of the topic that we are talking about, the summit of the African Summit in USA, and this summit will be, conducted with all the leaders from Africa. They will join the USA leader, Joe Biden, and I guess, our country is invited, and we don't know if our president will attend the summit or not. So we come and hear from him, and we listen to him, and from there, if we, the people of South Sudan or our audience in South Sudan Political Club, if they have any question, we can, give them a chance to ask him, and I'm sure he will be answer our question. So thank you very much, Respondent Edward, my brother Amigo, Sister Dominica, and Sister Sarah up here. So pass the mic to my brother Amigo, Sister Dominica. If you guys are there, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Mohandes Edward, I don't know, to some any questions.
Hearing you, Samin, I guess.
Thank you. My brother Luke, my two sisters, Dominica and Sarah. Let me welcome you, the audience here in the South Sudan Political Club, or Facebook, or YouTube. أنا ما هقول حاجة لأنه الضيف بتاعنا is waiting there. We will weigh in after he finished with all the answers that we're having for him, and then we as the moderators will come and weigh in with our questions and some of our comments and perspective. Thank you, Brother Edward. Dominic.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brother Amigo. I would like to thank my fellow moderators and our audience down, and I would also like to welcome our audience for our today's topic. I also want to welcome our guests. Like our brother Edward said, as always coordinate. يعني مثلا لما يكون في room شغال احنا we always postpone our rooms. Like today we could not do that because this room has been scheduled from a very long time, and we cannot also let our guests down. So I really want to apologize on behalf of South Sudan Political Club, but also for the inconvenience, but also I wish our audience would also understand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Sarah. Sister Demonica. Sarah, you came up. Thank you, sister. Do you have any, you want to say anything before we start the interview with Dr. Peter?
I would like to thank all of you, and I would love to greet our audience downstairs, and I would like to welcome our guests also. So hopefully it will be like a great show for all of us, and we can learn from him. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, my brother, Luke. Thank you, my brother Amigo, my sister Demonica, and also my sister Sarah. And also, I will not forget our audience, those are listening down there. And protocol are observed. Welcome to our show. And also, let me welcome those are watching the video from Facebook and also from YouTube. Welcome to the Voice of the People Forum, and please try to help us share the video and share with friends and let them also try to listen this very important interview with Dr. Peter Biar Ajak. Again, as I said earlier, today will be the second time for us in the Voice of People Forum to host Dr. Peter Biar Ajak. And especially in this today, we are going to talk about the participation of South Sudan in the United States of America Summit, which actually will be actually hosted in Washington, D.C. Between it will be between December 13 to December 15. President of United States of America, Joe Biden, he is actually hosting over 50 African head of state and the government at the White House from that date. So we are going to discuss today with Dr. Peter Biar Ajak what is that mean for the relation between the South Sudan and United States of America. All of us as South Sudanese, we know United States played a key role in helping to create the 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement that laid the groundwork for 2011 in referendum, and also self-determination to the people of South Sudan. Secondly, with the independence of South Sudan, became the 195 country in the world and the 193 member of United States. The UN, United Nations Security Council, established the United Nations Mission in South Sudan, UNAMIS, of South Sudan in July 2011 to consolidate peace and security and also to help establish conditions for development. The United States pays 27.8% of the mission, which is 1.2 billion by the July 2021 to July 2022. So we are going to discuss this with Dr. Peter Biar Ajak to show where is the role of United States of America in regard to what's going on in South Sudan. So let me apologize to those actually speak Arabic. معلش الشو بكون بإنجليزي لكن so far into كلكم you listen to so that will be so. Dr. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, my brother Edward. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's wonderful to join you on this show. It was great to be with you last time, and I'm delighted that I'm back.
Thank you so much. We are happy actually to have you again. Also, thank you for taking your time and to come and talk to the people of South Sudan in the Facebook and YouTube and also in the clubhouse. You know, the people in South Sudan, or they are sleeping, I think it's midnight, but later on they will come and they will listen to the show. So can you tell South Sudanese actually what is the concept of the summit before we go forward? Yeah.
Well, the summit was announced in July this year. I think June or July is when President Biden announced that he was going to host the African leaders at the White House. This has been going on for quite some time. I think in reality, it really began to take off during the President Barack Obama. Every year or so, U.S. will invite all the leaders from Africa to come to the U.S. and they will do the U.S.-Africa Summit. And it has become a tradition. Even Trump has also done it. And it's not just only the United States that does this. China also does it. Russia also does it. And there are other countries that are continuing to do this more and more. Now, you may wonder why that is the case, why that is happening. The reason is very simple. Africa is a very strategic location. As you know, it's one of the largest continents, only second to Asia, but is much more compact together geographically. Africa has the highest growing population in the world. Right now, is already home to more than 1.4 billion people. By the next 30 years, Africa will have probably 2 billion people. So the population is growing very fast. By 2100, Africa would have about 40% of the world population. The economy of Africa also is growing very fast. Over the last several decades, Africa has gone from being called a hopeless continent to a continent that is inspiring hope. And as I mentioned to you before, is quite strategic on a number of issues. First is the issue of economic growth and access to market. For China, for Americans, for pretty much everyone else in the world, Africa has a growing consumer population. And for companies and those with products, they want access to that market for themselves. Second, Africa is a very strategic place when it comes to security issues. As you know very well, Horn of Africa is extremely strategic, being next to the Red Sea, which is very, very, very important route in the global economy and supply chain. And then you also know in the West Africa, there has now been the growing threats of ISIS or Boko Haram that was very much present in Nigeria. It is now destabilizing a lot of countries in West Africa, which has brought back again the whole system of using coup d'etat to overthrow regime, as we have witnessed in Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. So on the issues of security is a very important area. But most importantly, on geopolitical competition among the big powers. As you know, the world is entering a new age. In fact, we can argue over the last several years, we have already entered this age. And this is an age that is going to be defined by great power competition. It is not the first time in history that the world has entered such a period where there are two big powers that compete for the leadership of the world and the institutions of the world. You know very well the World War II was a product of that. It was at the time when Germany feels that it was growing and it was able to flex its muscle on the global scale. But of course, we then had the Cold War, and the Cold War was that period of two main rivals, the United States and the Cold War. And that period went on from 1945 until 1992, when the Soviet Union collapsed. And with the collapse of Soviet Union, we enter also another unique period. And this is a period of a global hegemon, where the United States became the sole superpower that was able to exercise enormous influence in terms of preserving global security. That period went on until, say, 2001 with the 9/11 attack. With the 9/11 attack, the world changed. And with the war in Iraq and in Afghanistan that drained a lot of American resources, other powers that had become weaker began a period of resurgence, among which was Russia. And Russia became quite dominant, playing a very big role in many countries, not just only in its traditional sphere of influence, but as we witness in Syria, in Venezuela, in many different parts of the world. And I think really just prior to the global pandemic of COVID-19, I think we then also entered a new world. And this is where now China has since become the second most dominant economy in the world, and has since also become a great power and is basically aiming for political leadership. So here, Africa has find itself as one of the spheres where this great rivalry among global powers is going to take place. And it's not just only Africa, it will also be in the Middle East, in some of the South Asia, in Latin America, pretty much everywhere else in the world. So in that context, we see that this summit is going to be very important. Now, the key themes of the summit include looking at the global relations since the COVID-19. You know, this summit has not happened really since 2018. It hasn't happened for quite some time. So it's the first time that it is happening. And there is a lot that has happened since then. There was the COVID-19. As we speak right now, there is a slowly evolving epidemic right next our door in Uganda, with the recent outbreak of Ebola, with the Sudanese strain of virus, which is the most deadly form of Ebola. And a lot of people have already died in Uganda. So I'm sure the issue of pandemic is going to be very big on the agenda. Second is the disruption that has been caused by COVID-19 to the global economy and to the supply chain. People are going to look about how that is going to be managed. And then on top of that is the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which has affected the energy market as well as food market. Just yesterday, the future of wheat in the United States, the wheat market, went up by more than 7%. And this is due to this situation in Ukraine. But then there are other strategic issues that are going to be on the agenda, including the issue of climate change. I know you and I, we come from Greater Upper Nile region, and pretty much this region now is largely submerged underwater because of the flood in the Nile. And the flood that we are witnessing in South Sudan are quite bizarre. While you have flood here in some part of Upper Nile and Bahr Ghazal, in several parts of Eastern Equatoria and Pibor administrative area, the place is very dry, and people are actually have actually no water to drink, and animals have been dying. People are pretty much at a famine level there. So we have a weird situation where one part of the country is dealing with too much water, and then the other part of the country has no water at all. And these are some of the effects of the climate change. So those are going to be on the agenda. Issue of refugees, democracy, human rights is going to be very big, because you have seen how President Biden has been trying to define the current global age where we are in. And if you have had a chance to go through the US National Security Strategy for 2022-2023, which President Biden released a few weeks ago, only 2 weeks ago, there is a section there that focuses on great power competition, strategic competition, primarily with China. Because if you see, Russia, yes, is still a major player, but I think the war in Ukraine has affected Russia so much that when it emerged from this war, it would be a wounded power. But China, on the other hand, is a growing power with a lot of cash, with a lot of resources, that is expanding its influence on the continent. And the Americans now are beginning to think about playing a catch-up. So this summit is coming at a very critical time, and I'm very glad that it is happening. I'm glad that President Salva Kiir has been invited. It's not something that we should take for granted that he is invited, because we know where he stands on some of the major issues that are going to be discussed. But we are glad that he is invited. It's a great chance for him and for his regime to come and talk about what it is that they want to do in South Sudan. We hear all kinds of excuses. Things are not being implemented. The economy is in a free fall. People are not being paid salaries. Corruption is getting out of control. But what is the government doing about all of these challenges? We know that recently you talk about the crisis in Upper Nile, and he said, okay, there should be peace. But saying it is one thing. But then at the same time, actually doing something about it is entirely different. So I hope that he takes this chance to come here and that he engage. I also hope that he will have a chance to engage with the members of the South Sudanese diaspora in the United States and at least thank them, because they have played a big role in the United States here for the last several years of the conflict. They send money to their relatives. They send money to people. That money is what is used primarily to take care of those people, to treat them, to pay school fees. So the diaspora deserve a chance to engage with the president and also to ask him, what is his vision of the country? What is he planning to do to fix this problem? So this is the context at which the summit is happening. There's a lot of expectation. There's a lot of excitement. The entire US government will be involved in this. And I think, unlike previous summit, this summit will have a lot of activities. There will be a business sector that has been mobilized. They will come, they will engage in the summit, they will talk with some of the leaders. I will not be surprised if there are deals that are struck on the side, because one of the things that America is now thinking about very seriously is engaging the private sector on the continent and pushing for major investments and major deals to take place on the continent. So some of the major business leaders in the world will be around. The same thing also with governors of different states that will be available in DC, members of Congress, the Senate. The entire government will be there, and it will be a great opportunity for presidents in Africa to come not just only with their political leaders, but also to come with their business leaders. Think about what kind of project are they looking to finance, and where they are looking for technologies or other things that will advance the future of their countries. So I hope President Kiir and his team are busy developing their plans so that when they get here, they will have a chance to discuss them with a number of potential interested individuals.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Before we move forward, let me ask you a follow-up question. Do you think President Kiir will actually come to US and participate, in your view?
Honestly, I don't know.
Or you will send someone else?
Right. Look, honestly, I don't know. All I know is that he has been invited. And I think when I said before, we should not take that for granted, is because we know others who are not invited, right? So it's not every leader in Africa who has been invited. There are other leaders that are not invited. And this is why I believe that it's quite a unique opportunity for President Kiir. And I hope he and people around him are able to think about it in that way. In the first category of people who are not invited are those who are in power illegitimately, right? Illegitimately include those who took over the power through coup d'etat. The biggest example is our next door neighbor to the north, Sudan. Burhan is not invited, right? Not to mention Equatorial Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, all those countries where there has been a coup d'etat, they are not invited. And here, President Kiir barely qualifies, because if you ask, is he a legitimate president, right? There will be a serious debate on that issue, right? Because we know very well since the day the independence of South Sudan was declared, there has never been elections in South Sudan. And as a result, you cannot say that President Kiir is an elected president. He's a president, yes, but he's an appointed president. Yes, he did not do a coup d'etat, but when he finished his mandate and he did not organize the elections in 2015, and then the parliament voted to extend, and then they voted to extend, and they voted to extend, and now they're saying that they're going to extend again, you begin to wonder at what point is that extension really a concern of the people of South Sudan, that Salva Kiir should indeed be the rightful ruler, right? And the reality is, it's contested. Most of the time, we know that the parliament is paid. Like recently, they've been paid $15,000. Last time, they were paid $40,000. I have no idea how much they were paid before. And at some point, someone can just argue that this is not different from coup d'etat. So I'm sure the Americans weigh those arguments. And when they decided to invite him, is perhaps because there is something that they still value in that relationship and probably want to have maybe one last opportunity to engage with the President Kiir directly. Now, you know very well, Edward, President has not attended UN General Assembly in person for many years.
Yes.
He has been sending others every year, not coming himself, and we wonder why, right? And on the other hand, he travels a lot. It's not like he's just staying at home in Juba. He goes to the Middle East often. He even went to Russia the last time when China hosted the Chinese Africa summit. He was there. And people notice that he travels. So the question becomes, why is he not coming here? Has he given up on any possibility of repairing his relationship with the United States or not? That will become clear because if indeed he doesn't come with this invitation, that is a message that many people will read from his action because he has not been coming for many, many, many years. And there has not been a very high level engagement between the American government and South Sudanese government for quite some time. So it will be a shame, but I really hope it comes. And the reason why I hope it comes is because he knows very well that his own regime is not very legitimate regime. Is the reality of it. He hasn't been elected. He appoints parliamentarians who are appointed who have no teeth whatsoever. They cannot investigate a single thing. The entire judiciary doesn't function. The whole country is being managed by the national security. People being intimidated, being assassinated. Corruption is completely out of control, as we know very well, with the money being allocated to individuals every month. And if you look at the foreign ministry, people in the foreign service have not been paid salaries for years. And these are diplomats representing the country while the oil is flowing. We know there has been enormous mismanagement of the economy by the elites from the Ministry of Finance, primarily with the corruption, the payment of dubious contracts. We know that central bank is basically being run through overdraft. And even now, there are people roaming the streets in Juba with checks in their hands that cannot be cash because there is no money. But you have a check. But if you go and you try to cash the check, they say there is no money. But then there are people also getting money. So the whole system is so corrupt. I feel there is an opportunity for President Kiir here to come and really talk about his regime. And you mentioned before, because one can ask, why does America matter? And it's one of the things that I hope that we will come to talk about.
Yeah, actually, it's one of the questions.
Why does this matter for him as Salva Kiir individually? And why does this matter for his government? And then why does it matter for the people of South Sudan? So he has been invited. Some of us, obviously, when he was invited, okay, it was interesting. And we really hope that he comes because it will be a great opportunity for him and for the people of South Sudan. And we are looking for him to come. But if he doesn't come, that will also be very interesting because that will be something to look into and to analyze what will this mean and how much.
Let's guess. Actually, President Kiir, he came to attend the summit. What are you coming to say? Actually, what will be his agenda? What he's going to say in the summit? You see, the peace is not implemented. There is war going on inside the country. There is no freedom of the speech. So, what are he coming to present, Dr. Peter?
Well, he has to come and present what is he going to do to solve all these problems. He cannot come and deliver the same speech that our good friend Abdel Baghi delivered in New York.
Yes.
That kind of speech shows that you are not serious because you are not aware of your own problem and you are not aware of what kind of support that you need. Look, every country in the world has problems. It's not South Sudan alone that has problems. But the leaders of those countries who are in charge of those countries, they wake up every morning thinking about how are they going to solve those problems for their people. They go to bed every night thinking about how to solve those problems for their people. What about Salva Kiir? Does he go to bed every night thinking about the problems that people of South Sudan are in and what he's going to actually do to solve those problems? Does he wake up thinking about the people of South Sudan and what they are going through and how he's going to solve those problems? We don't know. So if he comes to DC, because everybody knows, because if you go talk to anybody in this town and you ask about the government of South Sudan, you will hear a number of things. First, people will say they are not serious people, right? And why are they not serious? They have no plan for anything, right? They come here, they make speeches. It has no relevance to what they're actually doing in Juba. It has no relevance to what is in the budget, what is in the strategy, what is in anything. There is no relevance at all. Things are not connected. Second is, even when they promise that they're going to do this, they usually don't do it. And this is a complaint that everybody that has worked with President Kiir will tell you, right? The last person in the room with him wins, right? So what you do is, even if you come in today and you tell him and you agree with him on things that you are doing, the minute you leave, there are, I mentioned last time that there is a cabal around him. This cabal will make sure the last word that the president hears is from their side. And once they hear that, then of course he reneges on everything else that he has agreed before. That is also seen as a sign of lack of seriousness. And you know very well that the president is still trying to legitimize his regime because he has extended the mandate of his government. And last time, the Troika countries made it very clear that any extension that has not been blessed by the people of South Sudan is something that they're going to distance themselves from. And I think the president should be in the mood of trying to bring allies on his side. I think the reason why he sent Abdel Baghe to New York last time with more than 60 people, it was so that they can also come and lobby. But from what I understand, there was very little engagement with the American leadership because people don't find them serious. And therefore, sometimes, why do you engage with someone that you know will not change? So if the president come here, this will absolutely, in my opinion, probably be his last opportunity to fix a relationship with America and show that his government can be trusted, is a government that can be a partner, not just only on issues of peace and security in the Horn of Africa, but on the larger issues on the continent, and that is a reliable partner for any of these big powers. The reason why I say that is if he comes this time with his usual just come and like talk and like, just say whatever come to his mind, then I think it would become a different ball game altogether. I think the only option is if he comes with a credible plan. That plan should have a minimum agenda of what he's going to do, right? What is his agenda to transitioning the country out of the conflict to democratic elections, right? That is going to be number one. What is his plan on that? What is he going to do to actually make these elections happen in 2 years? Because that is the basis for which others will recognize the extended regime. Without that, that would be very difficult. That is number one. Number two, what is his plan on fixing the economy, right? Economy is in the free fall. Pounds is losing value, right? What is his plan there? And that should also include a mini plan on how to deal with the issues of corruption, right? That is a very big deal. And then third, how is he going to deal with human rights situation, right? How is he going to hold accountable officers that are committing human rights violation? You've been hearing national security saying all kinds of nonsense that, they're going to prosecute people. They're going to do this. But what have they actually done? There will need to be specific things that have been done and things that will also be done. In my opinion, if he doesn't have that, then he should not even bother to come to Washington, because that will be a disaster. And that plan should also include what is he actually going to do and where does he need help? What kind of help does he actually need, right? And people are also going to watch not just only his engagement with the American partners, but also his engagement with his own people in the diaspora, right? Because in Juba, people know there is no freedom of speech. And then we know also people are starved. So when the president moves, he just donates all this money, so he donates and people are hungry. So they hear the money, they're very happy. But people know people in the United States here, you cannot donate anything to them. They're very much independent, living on their own. So when the president come now, there's a good chance they will ask him serious questions. So what is that engagement going to be like? So I think that is also another thing that people will observe. And if he doesn't have a plan, he should not even bother whatsoever to come to Washington, D.C.
Before we move forward, actually, I want also to follow up also with another connected question. If President Kiir he doesn't come, do you think he will send Dr. Riek Machar, or he going to send again Hussein Abdel Baghi, or he going to send Wani Yiga or Mama Nyandeng or Tabandeng, and why Dr. Peter Biya? Actually, it's analysis. Let's think about this here.
Well, so if he doesn't come, well, I'm not sure if you can delegate, right? Because you were invited directly by President Biden. And this is going to be at the White House. There's already over 50 head of state. As I mentioned, there will be businessmen, some of these billionaires, Elon Musk, whatever, all of these people will be around in Washington. You already have governors, and the White House is very packed, and all these presidents will come, possibly with their foreign ministers, maybe like with their finance ministers, maybe some business leaders that will travel with them. So it is supposed to be strictly head of state level, right? So if he doesn't come, first of all, already there will be, the whole participation will be downgraded. Because even if you are representing a head of state, but you are not head of state, right? Let's say you send a vice president. You cannot sit with the head of state. Yes, you are representing a head of state, but you are not the head of state. So that will already lower the level of participation. Now, as to who will he send? Definitely he will not send Riek. Right? He can't even allow Riek to leave Juba. If you send Riek to Washington, where he is possibly going to meet Biden, right? Those conversations, even though they're like on the elevator, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, one unique thing about human being is the ability to make promises to each other and to build trust and build rapport. And maybe Riek can connect with Biden in a very significant way that will have enormous consequences for Kiir regime in Juba. So he will definitely not send Riek, right? He will also probably not send Taban Dengai, because Taban is sanctioned, right? So if you send him, then American president cannot meet with anyone who is sanctioned. So that will completely be a waste of time, because they wouldn't even be allowed to the White House. Now, the other three are very interesting. Abdel Baghi has a big challenge of not being able to speak English. And he has also is very light touch on policy, and he doesn't have enormous experience on governance. He hasn't been a minister previously. He's just become a vice president on a day, So it's a very light. And last time with the UN, it was a disaster. Right? It's just that no one is talking about it, and nobody cares because the bar is so low for South Sudan. Right? The bar is so low. But it was a disaster. Like if it was someone else, another country, it could have been a scandal. But I think with this one, he will be outmatched, and I don't see it being helpful. So I think in the end, his two choices are Wani Iga and Mama Rebecca. These are his, if he wants to engage. Now the thing with Mama Rebecca is this: she was here a few years ago. Right, in 2021, right, or was it 20? Yeah, it was 2021 that she came.
Yeah, 2021.
Yeah, and they made promises. This is the problem. When you come here, you say you're going to do something, and then people wait for you to do it, and then you don't do it. And those promises, I'm sure she didn't make them up. They were discussed in Juba, and then she was delegated to come and relay those promises on behalf of the president. But none of them has happened. Last time I know, Mama Rebecca engaged with the American government. She had a meeting with the State Department, with some members of Congress. So the engagement was quite extensive. And as a result, there is a number of metrics, things that were agreed that the government was going to do in Juba things which have only got worse. And I know very well one of the things that was discussed was the issue of corruption. And it was made clear to her and to her delegation that this thing, the president has to find a way to address it. And if it is not addressed, it's going to destroy a relationship with the United States. We know that corruption has only got worse. Oil being sold in advance, with birds being sold to Russia, with the scandal with land, with gold, a lot of scandal. So now, when she come back, she will be asked question, and these are the issues where trust is always a problem. Wani may be a bit fresh, in my opinion, because he hasn't come in quite some time, and he has really been missing in action. Like, I wonder sometimes, like, what is going on with Waniga? I haven't heard anything from him. He has not been making any news. I don't know what he's up to. But if he's coming, he will need a very serious team around him, because Wani has a personality of someone that like to make fun, and sometimes people don't take him seriously because he's like always in a very light mood, and he's very friendly. He's a great guy, but these are serious issues, right? And they require like serious level of depth and of understanding. So I don't know, but of course the best option is him coming. That way he will engage. If he has strong messages that he will hear, yes, he will hear them himself. He will not need someone else to come and tell him what has been said. He will hear it. If there is something you want to say, he's the boss. Ultimately, he will say, this is my agenda. This is what I'm going to do. And that will be the end of it. But if he doesn't come, people will read it as shrinking from responsibility or running away from responsibility. And it's one of the main problems here in this town. Like even last time when President Salva came with those of Pagan and Dengalor, and they met with Bush, and when he was being asked question, instead of him answering, he would like delegate to Pagan or delegate to Dengalor or delegate to that one. And always people remember this as him ducking his own responsibility. And the question is, if you're going to be in the kitchen where it is hot and it's spicy and there's smoke and you don't like all of those, then don't be in the kitchen. So if you're in the leadership and you don't want to be bothered with all those issues, then you're in the wrong place. You should figure out what else you should be doing.
There is a question from Jonko saying here, what that was interesting in 2009. No, yeah, forget about that. Also, let's talk about the South Sudan relation with United States, Dr. Biar, especially in the context of the upcoming United States Africa Summit.
Well, you know our relations very well. They used to be the best, probably the best relations in Africa. And it didn't just happen, by the way. It took a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice over a period of 20 years to make the relationship between South Sudan and the United States great. When the war started in 1983, U.S. had a very close relationship with Jaffrey Nimeri government. Nimeri government has switched several times during the Cold War, but towards the end of its regime, it has claimed that it was a nationalist entity that was against communism. When the communists tried to stage the coup during Nimeri's time, that really broke the relationship that he has initially enjoyed with the communists, and he used the military power to obliterate the communists. And since then, he turned U-turn, became very close with the West. And during that coup, if you remember, some of the plotters were based in Libya, and the Gaddafi was a big player in supporting the coup. And Gaddafi had a very bad relations with the U.S. through most of the Cold War. And in 1980s in particular, you remember that there was a time when the U.S. airplanes bombed Tripoli. And those planes actually took off from Khartoum. They were in Sudan. Sudan used to host a number of military bases for the United States. So when the SPLA rebelled, the U.S. government responded by doubling military assistance to Sudan so that Sudan can crush the rebels of the SPLM. Without the support of Mengistu Haile Mariam and the Ethiopian Derg regime at the time, SPLM would definitely not have survived. So the SPLM, to appeal to Mengistu, because Mengistu was extremely ideological. He famously said when he killed Tafari Benti that his love of Ethiopia outweighed his love of socialism, which is a very, very weird statement, but show you the extent of his ideological orientation. So if you read the first SPLM manifesto from 1983, it's very loaded with a lot of communist words. And that was not by accident. It was on purpose, and it was intended to appeal to Mengistu and to appeal to some of his supporters. So when that happened, Garang was known in Washington here as a communist and as a commie. And that made it very difficult for relations with the US to improve. Now, several factors intervened and helped. One, Numeri was overthrown in 85. And at the time, he was on a visit to Washington, D.C. And when the Intifada happened, he was removed. The military the military regime of Sorhadab took over. Then Sudan became a democracy briefly. But then Omar al-Bashir took over power. And you know that Bashir was backed up by the National Islamist Front. And within a very short time, the ideology became very clear. Hassan al-Trabi was the power behind the military, was the ideologue. He started inviting everybody, Osama bin Laden, the Taliban, all the extremist organizations from around the world, from the fringes of Islam to Sudan, and made Khartoum to be the network, really the pioneer to some of the activities that you see now that the Islamic State and others are doing. But that was one of the things that helped to change the views in Washington. And Garang also had a committed a number of supporters and cadres that worked with him. You had young people that were coming up and were trained in diplomacy, the likes of Deng Alor, Nyal Deng Nyal, and others that were traveling around. Now, the 1991 Nasser Declaration affected the movement, almost destroyed it. But when the information started emerging of the scale of atrocities that have been committed by Riek Machar forces, there was a reconsideration of Garang and some of the violation that had happened under the SPLM. And with the support of those of Brian De Silva, John Prendergast, and Ted Dagny and others who were within the US systems, people began to engage with Garang. And then when it became very clear that the regime in Khartoum was very fundamentalist and it was a militant Islamic movement, particularly with the first terrorist attack against the World Trade Center in New York in 1993, then the attempted assassination of Hosni Mubarak in 95, and then, of course, the bombing of the U.S. embassies in Dar es Salaam and in Nairobi, U.S. outlook changed entirely. And Garang was such a visionary, and he was so articulate at explaining what the struggle of the people of South Sudan was. Khartoum has tried to label him as a separatist who was trying to separate the country, but he maintained his vision of New Sudan. And the vision of New Sudan was an antidote to all of those criticisms. He showed that he has a vision for how the economy can be managed through his discussion and his engagement. So things now began to change. And then the involvement of the evangelical movements and the churches. By the way, our churches play a big role. The New Sudan Council of Churches play a very big role, linking up with some of the mega churches in the United States, engaging at the grassroots with the evangelical movement, and then finally the coming of the Lost Boys of South Sudan in 2000, 2001. And with their presence and the ability to travel in churches, in schools, and share their stories, finally, the U.S. relation with the people of South Sudan reached the climax. And that's when the U.S. began to be very serious about the peace agreement and about some of the protocols that the SPLM was pushing that Khartoum did not want to sign. So when we got this relationship at independence in 2011, it was perhaps the closest relation that any African country enjoy with America. I used to remember when I was in the government, some of our neighbors used to visit us to try to meet with President Kiir to lobby him on their behalf so that he can put in a good word with the Americans. Every single time President Kiir would travel to either the UN or to the US on a bilateral relations, he will begin to meet with American president. Every single time, every single time. Even the Prime Minister of Ethiopia used to come to South Sudan to talk to him about how to improve the Ethiopian relation with America. But Salva Kiir inherited great relationship, just as the same way inherited a great movement in the form of the SPLM, just the same way inherited a great army in the form of the SPLA, just in the same way as inherited united people in South Sudan who were fighting together for the independence, and he torn it apart, right? He torn that relationship apart. How did he tear it apart? Through a number of certain behavior. People ask me all the time from Juba, what does America want from us? Well, America wants you to be true to what you say you are. When we fought for our independence, we said that we wanted to create a new Sudan. What was this new Sudan? It was a country where everybody was going to be treated as equal, regardless of race, regardless of tribe, regardless of religion. That you belong, that you are a Sudanese, and you will be treated in the basis of your character, right? We were not supposed to divide ourselves. We were not supposed to use intimidation to deal with ourselves. We were supposed to build a united people. We were supposed to build an economy that worked for our people, because we believe the reason why our people are poor and so marginalized is because when North Sudanese were taking care of business in South Sudan, they marginalized us. They didn't invest in our economy. They didn't build the infrastructure. So now that we were going to be in charge of our own resources, we were going to develop our country. And we were going to build an economy that works for the people of South Sudan, right? That is not what we have done, right? The same thing with security sector. You used to have this, when we rebelled in 83, the Nimeri regime, the Sudan Security Organization, SSSO, they used to arbitrarily detain people. They used to assassinate people. They used to disappear people. They used to torture people, right? So we rebelled because we wanted a society that was better. We wanted to build a country that was better. But now, what have we created? We have created a country that is no different from the country we were rebelling against, right? Everything that we rebel against in Sudan is what we are doing now. So when America sees that, it says you are not being true to yourself. You are lying to us about who you are. And we want you to be who you are because we help you, because we thought that that really was who you are, right? So this is a fundamental issue. So it has destroyed the relationship. The same with corruption, right? Our people are starving, right? We have some of the highest poverty in the world. Now is crazy. Just with the adjustment with the exchange rate this year alone, I would expect perhaps another like 10 to 15 percentage point increase in the poverty rate, right? And it's already very, very, very high. So relations right now are bad. They have reached a level where American ambassador, a vehicle that was carrying American ambassador, was shot in Juba a few years ago by the national security, right? That ambassador would have not survived if the vehicle was not anti-bullet, all right? That did happen. It went to the level where an American journalist was killed who was trying to cover the activities of the war. He was shot, intentionally shot, and then his body stripped naked and shown on TV as quote unquote white rebel. It reached extent where members of aid community who are delivering aid to the people of South Sudan to keep them alive, ladies working for aid organization, were raped by the guards of the president during the 2016 incident. These are just highlights, right? Peacekeepers have been killed. Statesmen that have not been forethought have been said. So the relation as we speak.
We have the data here from the Department of the State. The aid workers, those who are skilled from 2013 until 2022, they are 145. Continue.
Imagine. So that is just give you the highlight. And then the rhetoric, like imagine, like even some of us when we were arrested, one of the first charges was that I'm American spy. First of all, does America have a war with South Sudan for them to want to spy on South Sudan, right? So they create those narratives. Those narratives are created primarily by individuals within security organization who are afraid of some of your own colleagues, and they want the president to believe that they are the most loyal to them. So they always throw dirt at others, and that narrative has been happening. And now relationships are extremely bad, extremely bad. I don't think the relationship have ever reached this level, right? Because South Sudanese government has shown that it is not a reliable partner and that it cannot be trusted, right? So where the relationships are now, they are very bad. And this is why I said before that this invitation is probably the last chance, if there is ever any chance, to improve the U.S. relations with South Sudan.
Okay, let me ask you another question, Dr. Bia. Why does South Sudan matter to United States of America? Why?
All right. So now this is where now we have to really discuss issues from the big power and the political competition among the big powers. Look, in terms of economic engagement with America, we don't matter, right? It's very, very, very tiny. Right? The entire GDP of South Sudan is probably less than a GDP of like one American billionaire. So if you say, for example, like if you take like Jeff Bezos, then what he makes in a year is probably like 50 times more than the entire economy of South Sudan, right? So our economy is very tiny. Most of our energy markets we sell to China. We don't really buy that many products from America. The products we are supposed to buy, we can't get because we have messed ourselves up with sanctions. That is there. But South Sudan matter in a number of ways. First, is matter when it comes to America thinking about its own ideals. Right? Each country has its own ideals. It has a way in which it thinks of itself, how it connects to what its people want it to be, the best that it can possibly be. Our story of struggle and the ideals that we were struggling for resonated with the ideals around which America is established. America is not there yet. No country is there yet to its ideal form. They're always trying to make themselves the best they can be. President Obama used to talk a lot about making a more perfect union in the United States. It means that it's not yet a perfect union, but to make it more perfect. That is to make it truly a country where every citizen is treated equally and has access to opportunities regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of sex and class. And it's the same vision that is embedded in the ideology of New Sudan. So that was one thing that connects us with America, right? So there is that, and the fact that our country became a country because of the U.S. foreign policy engagement for many years. So there is that historical connection. But then there are also two things. There is one, the potential that our country has. Right? Our country has the size of France, has 80% of the land arable, can grow anything there. At least in 70% of the land, there is 2 growing seasons. But with the Nile water, you can build networks of canal to irrigate it and build like an enormous agriculture industry that can feed not only the continent, but the rest of the world. We have the wildlife. We have a lot of resources, many of which has not yet even been discovered yet. So we have resources, we have potential. We sit in the middle of Africa, connecting major countries. We have Ethiopia, which is a country of 120 million. You have Kenya at 50 million. You have Uganda at 50 million. You have Sudan at 40 million. You have Congo at 80 million. If you put together, and then of course Rwanda and Burundi, each at 10 million, and then you bring in Tanzania at 60 million. This is a big market, and we sit in the center of it. We connect the east and the west of Africa, so geographically is also very strategic. So there is a huge potential, to be a partner to help solve some of the problems that the continent face and the world face. But then there is also the geopolitical rivalry. And the rivalry now is primarily between China and Russia on one hand, and the United States and the Western allies on the other. And here is going to be very much similar to Cold War. Obviously, there will be lessons learned from Cold War that may not be repeated. But, a wise man said once that history moves circularly. So we move in a circle. So we may be back to where we started off. And this is really where we need to be thinking about things carefully. Not just only as South Sudanese, but as Africans. None of us want our countries to be the football ground where all these geopolitical games are going to be played. The Americans, the Chinese, and the Russians, they should be playing their games in their own countries. They should not be coming to our countries to play, right? And we as Africans should unite more and coordinate better. But the reality is, if we can't even unite in South Sudan as one country and to coordinate our activities, now imagine this at the level of 54 continents, 54 countries. And each of these countries are going to be weak alone. And if they're weak alone, they have to be very smart about how they manage these relationships. Because China is a major power. You cannot afford to piss off China, right? If you are engaging as a global leader, especially from Africa or from Middle East or from South America, you can't afford to piss off China entirely. You have to find ways to engage. But at the same time, you can also not afford to piss off America. And Africa also has to learn. Here in America, you read all these books and articles about how America has learned from the Cold War. But where is the knowledge about what we as Africans have learned from the Cold War as well? Not much. But we should be reflecting on that. What happened during the Cold War? What were some of the things that we would rather not want to be repeated now, especially in this period? And in my opinion, we have to know what it is that we are about. We are not here to support the West with its own view of the world and with its own hegemony of the world. And we are also not here to support China with its own ambitions about global leadership. Our job is to claim a space for ourselves and our people so that we thrive, that we grow, that we give our people the same quality of life that the Chinese and the Americans have. And we're not going to do that if we do not think about how we are going to grow our economy. These two countries are major powers. They have access to technology, to resources at another scale. So we have to think about what we are for, the vision for our own countries and our own continents, and then articulate that in how we engage with China, in how we engage with America, and be very strategic about how to balance this relationship, staying true to our values. The way that the debate is being defined in Washington has not yet been well articulated yet, but there are several attempts. The first attempt is to cast the world as democracy versus authoritarianism, right? These are the models that characterize America on one hand and China and Russia on the other. Now, Russia is a bit weird. They do elections, but these elections are highly guided. So you already know the outcomes before it happens. China doesn't even bother. We just witnessed the 20th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party last week, and is the party that decides, and that's it. These are two different models. And each of these countries is going to try to project its own model on our people, right? There are countries now that are integrating deeper into the Chinese model of a party and state. And if you see in South Sudan, we were already prone to be part of that model because of the history of the SPLM and how it comes from the Soviet and the communist thinking and organizational structure, where politics and the military are united in one leadership. America, on the other hand, come from a democratic experience. So here we are going to need to find a way to balance. What is it that our people want? And this is where it's important for us to go back about the promises that we have been telling ourselves. When we went to the war and all the South Sudanese people accepted to sacrifice their lives, and all those South Sudanese civilians, they donated their grain or their cattle or their goat or their chicken. The reason they did that, they want to live in a country where they have a say in it. And we're going to have to come up with an agenda that works for our people. There are leaders on the continent that define their own agenda. And through that definition of their own agenda, they figure out what works. When you see people talking a lot in politics, it's not because everybody wants to be a leader. It's because people want a stable environment in which they can build their future. And if the leadership of a country is not able to provide that, that encourages others to try to see if they can provide that. But when already you have a country that provides that, then you will see the rest of the population jumping into the market and looking for other opportunities to engage in. Example is Rwanda. Paul Kagame has been there for a very long time. And you don't see people arguing, why is Paul Kagame there? That is not a problem, because when he's there, he's doing his job. The country is one of the most secure countries on the continent. The economy has grown by 4-fold or 5-fold since it took over. Right? Rwanda now is a middle income economy. And it's just only within a generation. What he has achieved, no country has ever achieved it on our continent. Right? So each country figured its own model. So it's a combination of empowering your people, and at the same time, providing them with opportunities for them to engage. And if we figure that out, that will be our own model. We wouldn't have to be co-opted in supporting either the West or the East. And we see that the costs are enormous, right? When the countries don't do that. And particularly for the case of South Sudan, the way South Sudan is being viewed, first of all, I feel like South Sudan, if it is not careful, is going to find itself in a position where it will not be attractive to China and it will not be attractive to the West. And it's very simple. South Sudan government doesn't function, doesn't deliver. One unique thing about China is its ability to lift so many people out of poverty within a very short time. We know that more than 500 million people have been lifted out of poverty in China over the course of the last 30 to 40 years. That is not a simple achievement. It's a remarkable achievement, and it requires a level of efficiency that very few countries can master, right? And Chinese like to deliver. They like things to move. They like competence. But you have incompetent government in Juba. They can't manage the security sector. They can't manage the economy. They can't manage anything. And if it continues like that, then at some point, China will say, what are we getting out of supporting this regime? That question would be asked. And then in Washington, you have a regime that is seen as deeply in the Chinese-Russian orbit. On the one hand is the economic engagement with China, with the oil being sold to China. At the same time, the imports coming from China, the deal between the export-import banks and with the engagement of companies like the Trinity and so forth, the loans that are just crazy. How do you sell the oil for 5 years at a price of 40? Just bizarre, corrupt deals. And then you see the engagement of the Russian, with some of the Russian hardware in the country, Russian mercenaries and security personnel, training some of the security entities in Juba, which, by the way, is very concerning for South Sudan. If this relation is seen as that South Sudan has become a launching pad for the Chinese and the Russians, and it is in the center of Africa, is very dangerous for our country. It's directly inviting the geopolitical football that I said before that we should not want to be played in our countries to be played right at home with our kids and our women being present. And with our divisions and how the regime in Juba has used division and used tribalism, where South Sudanese are so tribalized, where Dinka people feel like they have been used by this regime to keep itself in power, and they feel they're pitted against their own brothers from other communities. This could be catastrophic for our country. And if you remember what happened in the Cold War, it was all kind of chaos. Civil wars being sponsored, coup d'etats being sponsors, assassination being sponsors, and all kind of like shady activities. And I'm not saying this is where we are, but I will not be surprised if we find ourselves there in a few years.
Thank you so much, Dr. Biar. In your opinion, why does South Sudan matter so much to United States? Why?
The American government and the American people feel like the struggle of South Sudanese people was so long and so brutal. And it appeals to them because there is a very big diaspora of South Sudanese in America. There's, I think, 150,000 South Sudanese in America. And most of these people came during the war of independence. And as I mentioned to you before, the way that the American people were engaged in that struggle, I think the only time when there was such a level of public engagement was during the apartheid and the South African struggle in the early 1990s. So the American people deeply feel connected to our cause. And as a result, there is that feeling that we have helped South Sudan in the past, we should help South Sudan again. But there are also geopolitical strategic reasons why South Sudan matter. The most important one is the geographical location of South Sudan, being in the center. We are connected in the center. We in Southern African Republic, we find ourselves there in the Central Africa. And we connect the West and the East. Is a great location, given what I just said, the rivalry among great powers. Right now, as you know, both China, US, France, and Turkey, and recently also the United Arab Emirates, they all have military bases in Djibouti. This is a very tiny country in the Horn of Africa that borders Ethiopia. And this is only a beginning. You are likely to see more military bases. Right now, Chinese are also trying to build another military base on the Atlantic side of the continent, on the western coast of Africa. Is being watched very closely here. The Khartoum relations with with Russia is being watched very closely. So when it comes to geopolitical competitions among great powers, South Sudan matters a lot, because is in a very strategic location. As I mentioned to you before, where we are is where there is population density. And we also have that unique connection to the Northern Africa, having also been influenced by the Arab culture and the Arab language, that we also are part of that world. So all of these put together, they show that this country is very important. And this is what I said before: is the potential that we have is another concern. And I said before also the economic resources and the opportunities that our country provide are also important. But it's not just only South Sudan that is important for the United States. It's the continent of Africa as a whole. And it's important for resources, for population growth, as I mentioned to you before. Africa will have 40% of the world population by the year 2100. And if you know right now, one of the major factors destabilizing Europe is migration from Africa. And migration is coming largely from countries that are dysfunctional. These are countries that are being run by dictators. So if you take next door to us, you have Eritrea, which has seen massive exodus of population because of the poor governance under Isaias Afwerki. So all these people that come, they go to Europe, they destabilize Europe, they create a lot of problem. There is a lot of anti-immigration wave that is going on now in Europe and also here in the United States. So focus is going to be, how do you keep these people at home from leaving their countries? And how do you make sure that they're staying at their countries peaceful and that they are staying in their countries with a purpose, with jobs and means to maintain themselves? And those are big issues. They're a big part of geopolitical concerns. So when you have countries that are being governed by leaders who have no plans on how to grow the economy, how to unite the people, how to stabilize countries that are in post-conflict setting, then people are going to be concerned, and people would want to make sure that those countries are stabilized. And when it becomes clear that the relation with those particular countries have reached a level where they cannot possibly be repaired, right? This is usually where you see countries will enter into another level where instead of like influencing a regime through socialization to change its behavior, the options become how to permanently put an end to that particular regime.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We remain with 2 or 3 questions, and then I will take questions from my colleague. And from our time, we're supposed to be here for 2 hours, and now we remain with 36 minutes. The next question, actually, I'm asking you kind of follow-up question. Why does the summit matter to the government of South Sudan or to the President Kiir? And do you think the government of South Sudan, they will buy the agenda of the summit? Let me read something for you from the website of the Department of the State in regard to the summit. The U.S. Africa Leaders Summit will build on our shared values to better foster new economic engagement, reinforce the U.S. African commitment to democracy, and that's why I'm asking you, will they buy this agenda? And the human rights, mitigate the impact of COVID-19 and of future pandemics, work collaboratively to strengthen regional and global health, promote food security, advance peace and security, respond to the climate crisis, amplify diaspora ties, and promote education and youth leadership. Go ahead, Torbia.
Well, those in Juba, and primarily President Kiir, must understand that the basis upon which his regime was recognized in 2011 was, first of all, the will of South Sudanese people to have their own country. And second, the promises that he and other leaders of South Sudan made that they will organize elections by 2015, right? South Sudan was born on the promise of democracy. He cannot escape that. So he had stepped away from that promise for the last several years. And there is no way he can run away from that. South Sudanese people themselves expect to vote at some point. And they expect the election to be organized. And the rest of the world that recognized President Kiir as the legitimate leader of South Sudan did this on the assumption that he was going to build a democratic future. So if he cannot accept that agenda of democracy, then it means that the basis on which he was recognized as a leader and entrusted with the care of South Sudan, that promise has been betrayed, and that right now Kiir has shown that he is unable to fulfill it. It will come down to that. So I don't see how we can say, I don't want that agenda. That agenda is a great agenda. I think is also rhyme with the agenda that the people of South Sudan want and the people all over Africa want. But if he does not want it and is not prepared to organize elections, then he must also prepare that at some point his regime will lose recognition by other countries. Now, it's important that our people understand the basis of sovereignty. Sovereignty is not absolute, not in the current international architecture, not even ever practically. The first time that the word sovereignty emerged and become something we talk about in international politics, it was at the end of the 30-year war in Europe in 1648, the Treaty of Westphalia. And that treaty was the first time that it was introduced. Now, over the last several hundred years, the concept has evolved so much. And particularly in the 20th century, with the World War I, and initially the creation of the League of Nations, and then at the end of the World War II with the creation of the United Nations. And over time, it became clear that there were countries that were given sovereignty. These are countries that were decolonized, most of Africa, most of Asia. These are the countries that got their independence, who some may argue were not ready to exercise sovereignty. Now, as other scholars have clarified, there are different forms of sovereignty. There is juridical sovereignty. This is a sovereignty that you are given on the virtue of being a state. And then there is empirical sovereignty. This is actually a sovereignty based on your exercise of power over your territory and the place that you control. Now, it became clear that many countries do not have empirical sovereignty. Example is South Sudan. They cannot actually control their borders. If you find now in South Sudan, there are areas being controlled by rebels, by militias, areas where the government cannot access. Right? It shows the sovereignty that South Sudan has is juridical, is based on legal norms, on the systems of state. Now, in 1990s, there was a lot of wars, particularly in Africa, West Africa, East Africa, Sudan. There was a lot of wars that was going on. There was a lot of suffering. There was a lot of IDPs. The term IDPs had to be coined. Francis Deng played a very big role in the scholarship. And he and others that were working with him, primarily at Brookings Institutions and at SAIS in Johns Hopkins University, a large body of scholars came together to study re-engagement on sovereignty given all these security challenges. Because you remember the United Nations was created to help resolve problems of collective security. And now with all these crises, refugees, IDPs all over the world, there was a concern that states were weak and were unable to handle issues that they are supposed to handle. And therefore, what is the role? So the question was put, what is the role of the international community when a state is unable to discharge its obligation? When the responsibilities of sovereignty have become so great for a particular regime to handle? Does the international community have a role? Can the international community intervene? And that is when the notion of sovereignty as responsibility first emerged. And you know very well with 2001, 2002, particularly with the case of Sudan being the main one, the responsibility to protect was adopted and added to the UN Charter. Now, what is the responsibility to protect? It is very simple. It says that every state has a primary responsibility to protect people under its borders. So in South Sudan, the regime of Salva Kiir has the primary responsibility to protect the people of South Sudan, physically, economically, socially, environmentally. But should the government fail to project that sovereignty and that protection, then the international community have obligation to intervene and to help protect the people. So here, South Sudanese government cannot think of sovereignty as absolute, that somehow they can just do whatever they want to do and get away with it. No, there are mechanisms for which they can be held accountable. And as I mentioned to you before, the regime in Juba should really think about, first of all, what is its lifespan? How long is it going to last, right? He may have no idea. When is he going to have election? What is his plan to get there? If there is none, and is not serving anything, it's not helping the people of South Sudan, right? Salaries are not paid, no services. America is still footing the bill for the humanitarian support to the people of South Sudan. And then the money is still flowing into the country and disappearing through the oil and all these deals, basically meaning that this regime is useless to peace and stability and to development on the continent and in the region and in the world. Then at the end of the day, people begin to ask themselves, what is the purpose of keeping this regime? And China will say, if Salva Kiir really leaves power today, will I really lose my access to oil? I don't think so. China will still get the oil. So then at the end of the day, people will begin to ask, what do I have to lose if this regime disappears, right? And when the answer becomes nothing, right, then the regime will be in a very bad position. So I think it is in their interest to prevent it from reaching to the level where someone will say, what is my interest if this regime remain in power? You want them to have some interest, and you want to feel like they're still in value, and the engagement is important, and people place value to it. But when people see that there is nothing in it and has become a complete, utter disrespect, no agenda, no programs, then people will start thinking about how to put a permanent end to it.
Dr. Biar, United States of America, they pay a lot of money. They paid $1 billion annually in humanitarian and development assistance and peacekeeping support at the South Sudan. Why don't they remove Kiir regime, or why they don't support opposition to change the government, in your view? And I know you are close to the White House.
No, look, because the simple answer is this. They have not decided that the regime of Salva Kiir should be removed. And they also believe it's not in their place to remove it. They believe that, yes, the regime had difficulties, but maybe there is still an opportunity for the regime to correct itself and change its behavior. For all the last 11 years of independence, U.S. policy has been regime, the change of behavior, the change of regime behavior, not regime change. But I feel we may be going there soon to the point where people may say, like, this is completely useless and there is no point. And should that happen, that would be the concerning time. Now, Americans keep saying that they support the people of South Sudan. And that is why they provide that humanitarian aid. But politically, they have not really supported the people of South Sudan. And some of us have been asking them, you keep saying that you support us. What is the evidence that you have politically supported us to deal with the Kiir regime in Juba? And there is no evidence. So I think now, let me tell you, I'm extremely excited about this summit. And the reason why I'm excited is one or two things will come out. Either there will be some improvement in the relationship between the US and South Sudan, which will mean there will be a change of behavior in Juba, or the relationship are going to be worse, which mean people will realize that a change of behavior is no longer possible. And if the change of behavior is not possible, then what else is there? So then people will now begin to seriously begin looking together on how to find that and how to make it happen. What is needed? Is it resources? Is it organizational capacities? Is it access to technologies? All of those things will become answered very soon. So I'm quite excited how this will be handled. Obviously, ideally, what we all preferred is a democratic transition for the country, and that there are elections. If President Kiir want to run, he's very much welcome to try his luck. It will be interesting to hear what he will tell the people to vote for him, but he's very much welcome. But the election would have to be competitive. Some of us will have to go and participate in it if it is going to be a credible election. And that will be the best way to handle the business. But if there are no elections, and obviously there is no change in how the regime is running things, our people remain in insecurity, they still can't afford food, they live in a state of misery, then I think by then now, people will be willing to listen to us if we come out with a rather radical ideas on how change can be brought about to the country.
And that actually was my last question. I was about to ask you, what should we expect from the summit? But kindly, you answer the question. Do you think?
Yeah, well, so yeah, we will see. I feel like the president will probably come. I think, you know, there will be people that will tell him not to go because they will not want him to hear certain messages. Obviously, you will not get a one-on-one meeting with Biden. You get opportunity to take a photo with him, but I don't think he will have an opportunity to meet with Biden. I don't know. I will be shocked. But one way or another, there will be some very serious messages that will be delivered to him. It would be better if he comes in person so that he get those messages directly. Now, I feel he will come, but if he doesn't come, then then 40% of the work is actually 80% of the work is already finished. Then it's very clear where things are going to happen, and it will also be great because then that means 2023 will be a very busy year for everybody. And it will be interesting to see what happens. But if he comes, it may be also interesting for him. But it will be challenging. It will be tough. His leadership will be tested. But it could ultimately prove to be beneficial.
Before we go to conclusion, Dr. Peter, actually we have been here for 1 hour and 40 minutes. Let me ask my colleague in the clubhouse. I have Dr. Luke, Amigo, Demonica, Sarah, Abani. You guys, if you have questions to Dr. Bear before we go to conclusion of our show. Luke.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Edward, and let me thank Dr. Bear for his analysis for our political situation in our country. I'm going to go forward to my question. My question is, Dr. Bear, as you know, in South Sudan, we have those in detention, someone like Kwelagur and Abraham Scholl, the religious leader. What did the human rights organization do to pressure the government of Salva Kiir to release the political detainees before they gave the invitation to the government of South Sudan to participate in the summit? Did they push for the release of those political detainees or not? And what the roles, people who are in diaspora, they can play if President Kiir, arrive in Washington D.C. to participate in the summit? What do you see that those who are in diaspora, especially those in the USA, they can do to push for the change in our country. Thank you.
And also, Dr. Biar, you are a good example of those who are in the Kolkur detention, and you know how it's so dangerous. It's not only bad, but it's so dangerous. So, go ahead, Doctor. Can answer the question.
Yes, no, see, I've been following the cases. It's extremely tragic. Both of them have spent more than 1 year now in prison. And it was only just recently that they were taken to court.
Edward, you close the mic.
Open the mic, Edward.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so can you hear me?
Yeah, we are hearing you, Doctor. Yes.
Okay. So as I was saying, it has been more than 1 year since 2 of them were detained. And it was only just recently that they were taken to court. And the charges that were leveled against them were ridiculous, just extremely ridiculous. And they show really how scared the government of South Sudan is of its own citizen. And I wonder really how they can continue to hold on to power if that's how they're going to be behaving. I know the human rights organization have been pushing for the release. A lot of statesmen have been issued. People have spoken with the Deputy Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs when he visited for the UN. I'm sure it was raised with him by a number of different delegations. But for some reason, the national security is holding on to them. So when Kiir was invited, there were a number of human rights organizations here who did not want him to be invited because of how he has run the country and how he's engaged in those human rights violations. But he was ultimately invited because people still believe perhaps it's best to engage him and to have a frank discussion with him at this level, see what his plan is on how to change course and begin to perform. What is his plan toward the elections and so forth. But also because for practical purposes, African Union is quite influential because African countries usually vote as a bloc at the UN at the UN General Assembly. So anybody who was in a good books with African Union was invited. Only those that has been suspended from African Union were not invited. And I suspect if President Kiir or his representative, whoever he delegates to come, when they come to Washington, D.C., this issue will be raised with them. And it's not just only those issues of Chol and Kwela Agüero. It's the issue of creating a space on the ground for civil society to be active. And you know that a lot of people that were charged with those people were activists. Activists, many of whom have now fled the country, and they are in the diaspora, whether they are associated with PCCA or some of the signatories actually to the peace agreement, like Rajab Mohandes, Wani Michael, and others. These are the people that are being accused in these. And it just shows the complete deafness in South Sudan. They don't listen to anything. They don't hear how they hurt themselves through these activities. They're not dispensing any justice. They're not building institutions. They're not doing themselves any favors. One would expect that the best thing the president can do is to order for the release and to stay the cases because the cases are ridiculous, as I mentioned. But if he doesn't, he comes here, I suspect that will be one of the issues that will be raised. And along with the issues of national security involvement, there's a lot of evidence, by the way, that everybody have. Americans have, UN have, everybody have, the UN panel of experts, they've not been sleeping for the last 8 years. They've been working around the clock. So there's a lot of information, and unless there is a real movement in containing corruption and addressing human rights violations, I don't possibly see how the relationship between the United States and South Sudan can improve.
Thank you so much. Amigo, do you have any question to Doctor?
Yeah, thank you so much, Brother Edward. And let me thank you, Dr. Björn. Thank you so very much for your time and answering all these questions. Actually, I think Brother Edward, he covered most of these questions. And I don't want to repeat anything that has been said. But there is one thing that I think Brother Edward asked you that question about what President Kiir he's going to present or what his speech in that summit. That's the crazy one here. And actually, later on, before the show, I just put and I created a speech for him, and I would like to share it.
Okay, that is very interesting.
Audience later about all the accomplishment that he did in the country. So, but I would like just to thank you. I don't have a question at the moment, but let's just pass the mic and till I answer this first question later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Demonica, do you have a question?
Yeah, I first of all, I would like to thank our guest, Dr. Bier. Dr. Bier, you mentioned a very important point. You said that the leaders that were not invited are those who took powers by their hands, you know. And I don't see Salva Kiir as an exception because, as we all know, Salva Kiir keep on extending his period in power. So don't you think there is no difference between Burhan and Salva Kiir? Since Salva Kiir, in my opinion, is illegitimate, you know. That's one question. The other question is, don't you think it would have been better for US to invest in African countries, that is in governance, democracy, and human rights? Because we all know that, you know, most of the African countries like this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor.
Well, look, I cannot disagree with you because I also feel the same way, right? Of course, we know President Kiir participated in the liberation struggle until we got our country. And then when John Garang died, he took over. We had only one election, that election in 2010, where he ran for the presidency of the government of Southern Sudan, which was a sub-regional entity. And he was elected duly, but he has no mandate from the people to be the president of the Republic of South Sudan. He has never sought that mandate, and that mandate has never been given. So I do agree with you. In fact, I have made that argument several times that the West should see this for what it is. This is really a coup. We know here how, in America, how they talk about coup, especially since President Donald Trump and the January 6th incident that happened in America. People call it coup from the left. And imagine if Trump has postponed the elections and remain in power, and if people go on the street, then he deploys the military and the CIA to murder people. That would obviously be a coup. And we keep on explaining it to American people to understand that this is a regime that has no legitimacy. And by the way, legitimacy is not just only on the basis of being elected. People are elected. But even though you are elected, you are expected to deliver on the mandate on which was given to you, the programs and the agenda that you articulated to the people. And this is why you see sometime in parliamentary systems, a prime minister who was elected can be kicked out, like what we have saw in England with Boris Johnson. Yes, he was elected, but he's no longer the prime minister. Why? Because legitimacy is not just only by being elected, it's also by performing. And when he didn't perform, or he created trust issues, his own party kicked him out and they put in a new prime minister. The point is, in the case of Kiir, not only was he never elected, but he has never actually performed. His performance has been awful. So he should have never been invited. And I hope he really understands how lucky he is that he is invited, because it shows that maybe people still consider him legitimate in certain quarters. But I do agree with you entirely. His regime is really questionable. I've been arguing that since 2015, when he postponed the elections, and I was arguing that there's no basis for him to remain in power, because the power is given by the people. So everybody knows that what is keeping Kiir in power in Juba is not the people of South Sudan. It's the security institution, primarily national security and Tiger and the presidential guard. These are the ones that are keeping him there. Now, obviously, yes, he has no democracy agenda. We should not even kid ourselves. But we hope that if he comes to this meeting, that he will come with one. We know he has no plan on what to do with the economy. In fact, several years ago, he said it himself that, "Oh, I know the economy is very bad, but I don't know what to do." That was him, the president. And then now, then he was like, "Okay, then can't you at least move away or move out of J1 and allow someone who can try something to be there?" We know on security, because you keep on using security as the excuse for not organizing election. With security, when he was addressing the Jonglei people who were fighting, he told them, if you keep on fighting, this time you will fight until one of you run. And then the one who run, you can come to Juba, and these soldiers that I have, which I have only for the purpose of protecting myself, I will then now deploy them and to protect you. And then after that, you cannot say you are a man anymore. Right? That is actually his word. So he has no security plan. And maybe this is the reason why he may not come, right? Because you cannot just wake up one day and say you have a plan when you have not had a plan for the last 17 years. He has been in power for 17 years and he has not had a plan. So I think it's a bit too old right now for people to expect him to have a plan. And if he doesn't come, it will be a confirmation that he doesn't have a plan. And some of our friends in the US that keep on saying, "Oh, let's give him one more time. Yeah, let's give him one more chance. Oh, one last chance." They will realize that there is really nothing to be done with this man. The only best thing is to begin a serious negotiation with him for his exit. And I think you would be surprised, but everybody will support that. Possibly even China will be willing to support that. Russia is going, as I mentioned to you before, is not doing too well at the moment. The war is so costly to them. They will come out of this war as the third-tier country, if at all. If it doesn't even disintegrate, it would be back to where it was in the 1990s with serious economic problem, unless if there is a deal on Ukraine that is beneficial to the Ukrainian. So that one is not really an entity that we should be talking much about. But China is a major entity, is a major player, but China expects performance. China expects you to be doing something because they want to have good relation with the people of South Sudan. And they don't want to be seen as just only extracting resources from South Sudan. They want to feel welcome. They want to feel that they are a partner that is helping. And they're not just playing in South Sudan, they're playing for the whole continent. So if the association with Kiir regime at some point will become bad for their business, they will cut themselves off from that relationship. So I feel Kiir regime has been helping us to put the noose around its own neck because it keeps on confirming what we say it is to the rest of the world. We keep saying that this is a regime that has no understanding of how the world works, has no understanding of the international systems, the responsibilities that come with sovereignty, with being a responsible actor in the international security institutions. We keep saying that it's a country that is not a partner on any of the major issues that face the continent, climate change, infrastructure, development, disease, healthcare, none of it. So the question will become now, how can people of South Sudan be helped? so that they deal with this crisis, which is now facing them, and restore the dignity of their country and become again responsible actors in the international security institutions.
Thank you so much. Sarah, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. I would like to thank Dr. Bier for great analysis. And honestly, I learned a lot today from you. It was a great show. My question will be like, we all aware about the relationship between America and South Sudan, because Salva Kiir is not doing a great job in our country. The country is in crisis, and our people are really suffering. And the government is of America, they're all aware, especially Joe Biden. He's aware about what is going on in our country. What is the really purpose for Biden to invite him? You know, and he knows that every time there is anything that is going on in America, especially like he didn't come for a United Nations summit for a long time. He's been sending people, you know. So what is the purpose exactly, and what is the plan of American to invite him at this time? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, look, I cannot speak for the American government. I don't know what is their own logic. I can only analyze based on snippets of information that we have access to. As I mentioned to you before, U.S. invites leaders that are in good books with Africa, even the leaders that it doesn't like. Right now, one of the countries that is also having very bad relations with America is Ethiopia. Abiy Ahmed, with the war that is going on in Tigray, Americans are not happy about it. But he's invited. And the reason why he's invited is because he's in the good books with the African Union. So out of that, although Americans, I know a lot of people didn't want Kiir to be invited, but because of that angle with the African Union, they invited him. It's out of respect to the African Union. But in terms of their plans, I think really they want to hear from him for the last time. What is his plan with dealing with the crisis that South Sudan face? What does he need? What help does he need? Does he need help? Okay. What help does he need? What exactly does he need? What is he prepared to do on his own? And what can others do, particularly America and the Troika? And I think that engagement is important because the relations with the US has been going through phases. If you would recall, Biden came to Kenya when he was vice president under Obama. I remember very well, he stayed at Intercontinental Hotel in Nairobi. And President Kiir traveled from Juba to Nairobi to go and meet with him. And there were a number of people around in that meeting. And the discussion was very frank. President Biden is absolutely a very frank leader. And it was around what is really the problem in South Sudan. And from what I understand, Biden said some very serious words to the president about his responsibility and his role in the crisis that was happening in South Sudan. I do believe if Kiir honors the invitations and come, he will also hear again from President Biden or members of his administration some very serious message that affects life and property in South Sudan, which is supposed to be under his oversight, but because he's not discharging those responsibilities, the international community may have to think of ways to help people there. So I think those discussions will be important to assess, really, this regime. What is the way forward with it? Is it a regime that has a way of changing its behavior? Or is it a regime that cannot be changed at all? Is it too deformed to be reformed, as John Grant used to say of the National Congress Party? That is a question to be determined. And I think if President Kiir comes or whoever he sent, it will become clear. But the intention why he was invited is because he's in the good books with the African Union. And I think there are also major policy changes in regard to U.S. policy to South Sudan that are going to happen. Next week is elections. As you know, a week from today will be the midterms election. And out of the midterms election, there will be a clarity on what will the future looks like. But I am excited, as I mentioned to you before, because 2023 will be a very big year. Government has said things that it was going to do, which is no longer implementing. It was supposed to graduate security forces. There was a timeline that they submitted on implementation of the agreement, which is already lagging behind. And it will lag more and more behind by 2023. And if it becomes clear that this is a regime that cannot be trusted, I think it will make it easier for the South Sudanese opposition to find the kind of support that they need to unite the country and build a prosperous future for the people of South Sudan.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Amigo, no, sorry, Bani. Bani, are you there?
Yes.
Do you have
thank you. Ustaz Edward, Tuana Basalam la Dictor. Greeting, Dr. Bier. I apologize, I came late, but my question, Sister Dominica has just asked it in the other way, about the criteria that qualifies South Sudan to attend this summit. And you might have answered it earlier in your presentation. But as you just said, you are excited for this summit. Either Kiir will attend or not. But if he attends, what do you expect from South Sudanese in diaspora, the politicians or all the opposition? What do you expect from them on that specific date if Kiir attends the summit? Thank you.
And that actually, Dr. Biari, was actually my last question to you. And Abani, she just asked you that question so you can answer it. What should we do as the people of South Sudan in America? Let's put it, and also I will prepare again for another discussion before the summit. You can come again and we'll discuss and continue what should we do. So go ahead. Okay.
Well, there are several things that South Sudanese in the diaspora can do. As I mentioned, this country is free and people can express themselves. And I feel one of the reasons why President Kiir is usually afraid to come to visit Western countries is because he's afraid that people may protest. There were protests, but they happened earlier during the UN General Assembly meeting. There were South Sudanese protests outside, but they happened before the delegation got there. So people that feel wounded by Kiir regime, feel mistreated in some ways or another, they can protest. Is one thing that can happen. Two is, I don't know what his plan will be. Maybe he will plan to engage with the diaspora. And if he plans to engage with the diaspora, this will be an opportunity for people to hear from him. People can ask him questions about his plan to handle some of the challenges that face the country. And if he doesn't have any plan, then tell us why he doesn't. So if he comes, maybe he will organize meetings. Now, as I mentioned, the meeting is December 13th to the 15th. So people will probably arrive on the 11th or on the 12th. And then some of them will stay maybe extra days afterward or not. He'll probably get a visa that can allow him to stay longer if he wants, and he can travel around if he wants. But it will also depend on his agenda and what he intends to do during that time. But I would encourage South Sudanese people to engage. It's a very important time. We cannot give up and not engage with the issues that surrounds our country and that affects whether we'll be in peace or war. We have a moral obligation to engage, either to organize ourselves or to engage with our leadership and with people that are running our countries. And in 2023, we will have to engage ourselves too, and talk among ourselves, build a relation among ourselves, because that regime there is there because the people of South Sudan still tolerates it. And if people of South Sudan were sick of it, truly sick of it, they can find a way to get rid of it. And it will not be difficult to do. But it's because the people are divided and they haven't really determined that removing that regime is the top priority. That is why it is there. Well, we have all endured. We have seen the behavior of this regime. Even when we are willing to give it a chance, it keeps on disappointing us. It has no agenda. It has no program. It has no ability to organize elections. And it's not even looking for help from those who can help it so that it can be helped to organize election if that is what it needs. So it just wants to stay there and die in power with the country with it. That obviously we cannot allow. So now we will watch and see what the government will make of this opportunity. If not very much, then I will encourage the South Sudanese people to make the most of that opportunity. It will be the time now to have a coherent argument that will be shared with the international community. And that argument should be repeated in whatever forum that we have access to, that we have a regime that has no vision for the country, that has no ability to organize elections, and we are sick of it, and we need a regime that can bring power back to our people so that our people get to decide what to do with that power.
Yeah. Thank you, Doctor. Actually, what is your last message to the people of South Sudan? And also, I want you to consider the situation in South Sudan right now. The tribal war in Upper Nile, the tribal war between Nok and Abyei, and also there is no salary. So the flood in Greater Upper Niles and Northern Barghazal. What is your message to the people of South Sudan? Also the tribalism, and you can know the discussion outside in diaspora. So Dr. Biar, what is your final message to the people of South Sudan inside the country and outside the country? What is the message of hope? Thank you.
The first thing that our people must understand it is that they are the ultimate power in the country. But they have allowed a regime of President Kiir to take that power and to use it against them. They are divided, they're being mismanaged, they're being brutalized. Now is the time for South Sudanese people to realize that the problem is not with each other. The problem between Abyei and Twitch Mayadit is not with themselves. It's not with the communities. Those communities have no problem. In fact, they have lived with each other for hundreds of years. They have intermarried, they're deeply integrated. And we know that Abyei is going to be part of South Sudan. It may take a while, but Abyei will ultimately, soundly be part of South Sudan. It's going nowhere. The problem that they are facing are due to the failure of leadership. It's the same thing we have in Malakal. It's the same thing that we see in different parts of Warab State. It's a different thing. It's the same thing that we saw in Western Equatoria. our people are on their own. It's as if they don't have a government. They're just there on their own. They're there by the mercy of God. And I think at some point, this reaches a level that cannot be tolerated. We have waited patiently for the last 11 years, praying that our president will change the way he conducts business, but he is not. Either he's completely undercapacitated and unable to perform in this job, or he's surrounded by people that cannot help him to perform in this job. And in my view, the two are the same. You can't be a good person and a great leader that has no ability to appoint good subordinate that can make you succeed. If you can't appoint good subordinate to work for you, then you are not a good leader. So there is now an opportunity for South Sudanese to show leadership. And this is a challenge for those inside the country and those outside the country. Because the argument that you keep hearing from certain corners is, even if we were to remove Salva Kiir today, then who is the replacement? There's always that question that is put there. And it comes because of the division with the opposition. And the opposition is still divided. And we have to expect that these divisions will continue for some time because, people are free. And free individuals are very difficult to engage. And when they come together, when they don't come together, that is politics. That is how they engage, is through the use of their unique freedom to create interesting dynamic relationship. But there is an opportunity for South Sudanese people to show leadership. And right now, there are certain young people that are stepping up. Over the last several months, Comrade Achek, there has been young South Sudanese leaders that have been getting in touch with other leaders from around the world. These are young people that care about democracy and human rights. And they realize that this is not just only a problem in South Sudan. It's all over the world. There are people all over the world across different continents that care about democracy, who live under tyranny, and they want to liberate themselves and have a future where they can participate in deciding which government that rules over them and how that government engage. Well, right now, and this is, I'm very delighted for the first time to announce, these South Sudanese will be they will be forming a delegation that will travel next week to a major international conference that is being hosted in partnership with the government of Lithuania. This conference is called the World Liberty Congress. It's the first of its kind. More than 150 leaders from 60 countries around the world will gather in Vilnius, Lithuania, where they will talk together about the problem that dictatorship pose to the world and how to work together as people that desire a world of democracy in helping one another in their countries, in their own unique struggle, how they pool their resources together to make sure that they succeed. And South Sudan is top of the agenda. I've been privileged to work closely with some of these leaders within South Sudan and outside. And I can tell you right now, there will be a delegation of South Sudanese that will attend this conference in Lithuania. They will engage at the very highest level with governments of the host countries and some of the countries around the region. You know very well Lithuania share a border with Ukraine. So a lot of Ukrainian displaced people will be there. It shares a border with, is one of those countries that is at the border with Russia. So it's in that part of the world. So they will have a lot of extensive engagement within Lithuania and within the region to make connection and build network with others, other like-minded around the world, and to consider a multitude of actions that the people of South Sudan can undertake to liberate themselves and to bring about a future of democracy and prosperity for themselves. This delegation, they will take place, as I mentioned to you, is going to take place next week. It's going to be a major event. And these are young people doing these initiatives on their own that are telling a story of South Sudan to the rest of the world. They're telling a story of how a democratic dream was hijacked by a clueless leadership, which then turned the country upside down. And they are looking for support. They have a program, an agenda. There is a media strategy around it. I want South Sudanese people to tune in and follow these people next week as they engage with the the rest of the world. There will be a lot of democracy activists from the continent, from all over the world, Latin America, from Australia, from Middle East, from South Asia, from Europe. They will all gather there, and with also support of different entities like the Freedom House, the National Endowment for Democracy, International Democratic Institute, International Republican Institute, and number of major financiers. The challenge is to see how to organize resources, technology, training, expertise, and leverage it together as a package of tools that can be used to topple dictatorship. The strategy is simple, is to replace countries where dictators rule with countries that will be ruled by Democrats, is replace dictators with Democrats, thinking of a host of tools that can be deployed. So it's the first of its kind. It's going to be exciting that South Sudan has been part of this program from the very beginning. And I'm particularly delighted to say that our people will be engaged in this. They will be speaking at that. They will get the support that is needed. And we hope with the development that will happen in the next several weeks, it will become clear to the rest of the world that there is no shortage of leadership in South Sudan. There is no shortage of people with vision, with expertise, with networks, with access to resources that can turn the country around. And I want our people to begin coalescing around these people as a viable alternative to the regime that we have witnessed in Juba, that has no vision, that has no ability to manage the government, to manage the security sector, to manage the economic sector, and that has destroyed the reputation of the people of South Sudan, that has deployed relationship that generation of South Sudanese leaders have built with countries, a relationship that could have benefited the South Sudan that we have now. So whenever there is void of leadership, we should not worry, we should not despair, because it's an opportunity for others to rise up and fill that void. And I'm glad that there are young leaders of South Sudan that are rising up and that are beginning the kind of coalescing that is necessary for all of us to come together, connect with the rest of the world with a simple agenda, which is the replacement of the regime in Juba with another regime that is democratic, that will allow the people of South Sudan to move forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Biar, for being with us. Actually, we'll continue and arrange for another discussion with you. There is a quiet question. I was seeing people writing, asking questions in the comment section. I did not take them because actually our time was 2 hours, and now we have 2 hours and 20 minutes. So I think by next week, if you are not busy, we'll talk in the back channel, and then we'll come again. And also, like, there is a lot of questions people asking here. We'll come and talk, and also give time to the people that we can take questions from them and limit my question. Anyhow, thank you for what you're doing, and it was very nice to be with you. It was very excellent interview. Thank you for answering my own question and the question of my colleague, Dr. Peter. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Edward Achek, for hosting me. It's always a pleasure to come and have this important conversation with you. And I want to encourage you and your entire team, each and every one of the moderators. You guys are doing a great work. We need these discussions. Our people need to talk. We need to think, and we need to think about a better way for our country. So continue the work you are doing. I will always be excited to come back and talk with you.
Thank you so much. And also we'll talk about the conference. Actually, we are going to continue in the clubhouse. My look, Amigo, Demonica, Sarah, Banida will continue in the clubhouse. So if you have time, you can join them also and listen or contribute if there's a question, because we are going to open the hand. You have a
Excellent. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. شكرا جزيلا لكم انتم مشاهدين صوت الشعب، الناس اللي كانوا معنا في حلقه في فيسبوك، وايضا منبر صوت الشعب في يوتيوب. شكرا جزيلا. ايضا المستمعين بتاعتنا في كلاب هاوس، شكرا جزيلا للزمن بتاعتكم. وانا بعتذر، حقيقه الزمن بتاعي ما كان بيسمح انه نقعد مع دكتور بيتر more than 2 hours. لكن برضو الناس اللي قاعدين في فيسبوك انا بقول لكم انضموا للكلاب هاوس. تيم يكونوا مستمرين في كلاب هاوس. انت لو عندك اي كويشن ممكن تساله في كلاب هاوس. وانا زي ما انا قلت، انا وعدتكم انه الحلقه الجايه ان هنا هنرتب لحلقه ثانيه مع بيتر بيار، والاسئله الناس اللي عندهم كويشن ما يعني ممكن يطرحوا الاسئله بتاعهم. انا بديكم يعني زمن كفايه جدا. So anybody can ask his question to BR. So it can be just just let we share the opinion with the question and answer Q&A. So شكرا جزيلا لكم. برضو انا داير نعلن انه يوم السبت اننا نستمر سوري في الحلقه الثانيه مع جنرال باغانامو، والانترفيو بتاع يوم السبت هيكون بانجليزي. الناس بتاع اللغه الانجليزيه لانه يوم السبت انا وعدتهم انه we don't want to confuse ourselves Arabic and English وكده لخبطه كده. So we take one. So next Saturday we'll be talking with General Pagan part 2 in English. So أنا زي ما اعتذرت لكم أنا منين ماشي لأسئلة ميلوك وأميغو ديمونيكا أباني سارة الناس دي هتتواصل في كلاب هاوس. شكرا لكم، ربنا يبارك فيكم و you have a good night. Thank you so much. Thank you.